Just kind of walk us through that series. Obviously, look at those numbers, big wins, all three of them by Louisville. It's good to see the Cardinals take care of business against a team like that. That's what you want, right? That's what you're looking for. Get some guys down the bench, maybe some innings, or get some swings, get some at bats for some guys that you may need down the road. Welcome to the Third and Central podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to the University of Louisville baseball program. This is Matt Sefcovic, joined by Terry Pennington. Terry, I know we've had a lot going on over the past couple weeks. I've had a standing meeting with the Mouse down in Orlando, so I was gone at Mickey Mouse, spending some time with the family down there, so I've been away for a little bit. You've been holding down the fort up this way and taking in pretty much every Louisville game, which we'll jump into in just a few minutes. I know the weather up this way has been quite a bit different than what we experienced. I actually got sunburnt down there in Orlando, not something we expected in February. We were not prepared for that one bit, but we were checking on the weather back home and watching some of the games as we were down in Orlando. And we had talked a little bit earlier about some of the cold and the wind that you experience up this way. So not excited to come back to this kind of weather, but nonetheless, Louisville's 8-2 right now. So we've been able to put some wins together. We'll jump into those here in just a few minutes. But how's everything going your way?
Yeah, pretty good. I would have liked to have that sunburn problem. That's for sure. Over the last couple weeks, there's been some cold days, some pretty good days. It was windy, but yeah, over this past Friday and Saturday, hopefully we're done with that kind of weather and that kind of wind, and we can move on to some better temperatures for sure.
Yeah, I was going to take my son and wife up to the game on Saturday, and I went out in the morning to run some errands, and the cold wasn't too bad, but the wind was pretty rough. And I said, I don't think this is a good game for a 4-year-old. So we changed plans a little bit. We'll hopefully get up this weekend to watch UIC, but we'll hop into that in just a few minutes. So while I was gone and away, Louisville swept Western Michigan 14-3, 7-2. And 10-4. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch a ton of those games just because, bouncing around with Mouse and Goofy and all the folks down in Orlando. So just kind of walk us through that series. Obviously, look at those numbers, big wins, all three of them by Louisville. It's good to see the Cardinals take care of business against a team like that. That's what you want, right? That's what you're looking for. Get some guys down the bench, maybe some innings, or get some swings, get some at bats for some guys that you may need down the road. So what did you see? Kind of what stood out to you with the series against Western Michigan?
I thought it was really good. We pitched really well that week for the most part. I mean, it's not going to be a perfect inning from every guy you run out there, but again, Forbes was dominant. And it was really nice then obviously it was a little bit of a different series, backing it up a day with the weather. But so then on that Sunday, getting Reed back out there getting Parker back out there, excuse me. Apologies to Parker. Getting Parker back out there and just seeing him like really display what he has for his full outing. Because I thought he was really good the first 3 innings, obviously down in Texas, and so to get him like a quality full start like that, I thought was huge for him and his confidence, and he's got all the talent, and so to see him be able to display that, I thought was great. I think throughout that weekend, you also you saw Cutts come in, he was so good, and you just see the kid is so talented, and he flashes all the skill level and the full repertoire of what made him the pitcher of the year in the MVC. And so I thought the pitching definitely was what stood out to me, for sure. And just being able to, like you said, run a lot of guys out there. Let's get some other guys in, play some different, we pretty much kept the lineup the same, but that weekend, again, offensively, Jake Munroe is good. He's just torn the cover off the baseball since he got here, and so I think those were some of the things that really stood out just from that weekend, and was great to get a sweep because I mean that's that's what you're supposed to do, right, in that series. And so just went out and handled business, and for the most part that was pretty clean baseball, and so that was good to see from the guys.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think, heading into the series a little bit, that when you play a team like Western Michigan or any team like that from I don't want to say lower conference, but a lower conference, you want to go out and sweep them, right? Like that's the goal. That's anytime you go out and play, but it's hard to have that expectation. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. You can look at the schedule all around the country this weekend and every weekend for that matter. And, the top teams, I mean, they're getting beat. I mean, look at Texas A&M. They were one of the top teams, or the top team, most of the polls in the country, and that, they've struggled this year. And I'm not just picking on them. That's anybody you look at. Everybody's kind of taking lumps on the chin early in the season. A couple of guys you talked about, Patrick Forbes, super excited to see what he's done and how he's kind of evolved into the guy this year. Right now he's sixth in the country in strikeouts. He's got 30 strikeouts in 15 innings. I mean, he's putting up just insane numbers. You talk about Jake Munroe, a transfer. He's hitting 487 right now. He's top 20 in the country in batting average. As a team, I think Louisville's top 6 or 7 in the country in batting average. So it's just exciting to see that they're going out and taking care of business against those types of teams. Because, you look a season ago, we lost the opening game. I think it was a St. Bonaventure in a 7 or 8 inning game. It was a shortened doubleheader. And you talk about cold games. That was I was there for that one. That was a cold baseball game. But so just to see them go out and take care of business and sweep a team like Western Michigan, that's what you want. And I think they've shown that progression. So it's good to see those guys step up and take care of business against Western Michigan. And then they jumped over into a midweek. I'm sure that was an exciting game to be to. You probably never thought it was going to end, right? Louisville won that game 15-11, just shy of 4 hours of a baseball game, which the baseball purist, I'm sure, will probably not not happy about that one. But myself, if I'm going to go to a baseball game and I can watch 26 runs scored, I'm A-okay with that. 26 runs, 36 hits over 4 hours. That's the kind of game I love to go to. I love offense. That's just me. So kind of walk us through, what were your thoughts on that? I mean, it was back and forth from the beginning to end until Louisville really took command at the end of the game. Just, I think, showing that maturity and that growth of being able to, every time Butler really, swung, we had a response and came back. So kind of walk us through that and what that 4 hour midweek game looked like to you.
Yeah, I think, honestly, when I go to a midweek game, I don't want to say that's exactly the kind of game that I think I'm going to get, but I mean, you don't expect those to be 3-inning baseball games for sure. Typically they get a little longer as the weekend goes, and, you just don't have the same level of pitching, and you wouldn't expect them to have the same level of pitching. And so, yeah, it was back and forth. It's definitely not one of those games that when Butler would get ahead, maybe you never thought you were never really, at least I was never really nervous in terms of what the outcome was going to be, because you knew they were going to be able to keep hitting, and you just were kind of looking for, who's going to be the guy that kind of can shut this down pitching wise. And I know that it was at the tail end of the game and we had kind of already essentially put it away, but I thought Ethan Eberle really stood out to me pitching wise that game. He's got good stuff, not maybe quite as heralded as some of the other recruits that have come in, through the first couple weeks of the season, maybe hadn't gotten the opportunity, but Dan puts him in, he shuts him down. You turned around and saw it, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but he brought him right back in this weekend, and Dan talked about it, made the mention of, hey, let's ride the hot hand. And he's been doing the same thing with Jack Brown early in the year. That's the right strategy, right? I mean, if a guy's hot, you go to him. When you're playing basketball, go to the well, keep going. If somebody's hot, feed him the basketball. And in baseball, you got a guy going, you got his confidence up, give him the baseball, and let's see what happens. And I thought, the guys, not every game is going to be, you're not going to have Forbes on the mound every day to strike out, at least on average. Now, I mean, 2 different times he's had 10 or more. But he's averaging 10 strikeouts a game. You're not gonna get that from every guy you run out there. And so I thought it was great to see them win a game a different way. and just stick at it. One of these slugfests, almost seems like a slow pitch softball game in terms of, the number of runs you're putting up there. But the guys grinded it out, and it was, it's always good to see you be able, like I said, be able to win a variety of ways and put one in the win column.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up. And I think just as us fans kind of taking a step back sometimes and realize that, you can't put your Chucky Hepburn on the field every single time you go out and play, right? Like you can't put your best players on the baseball field every time. Like it's just a different ball game than basketball or football. And you talk about feeding the hot hand, I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit more, like you said with Everly, but Daniel Levitch has been just outstanding this year. And I think we've all known that he's got the stuff, but seeing him kind of put it together and what he's been able to do this year, I think he struck out all 3 batters he faced in the game against Butler. Did the same thing again against St. John's, and we'll touch on that. But I think right now he's one of the guys in the bullpen that we had talked about before the season started. But he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. But I never imagined this. And just such a pleasant surprise to see some of these guys stepping up. Jack Brown, you mentioned him. So it's been really exciting to see some of these guys step up early in the season. They're just going to keep getting better, right? It's early on. That's how Dan and Roger work. His teams typically get better as the season goes on. So I think that's something that I'm really excited about. And I always reference this when we talk about, guys that are hot, getting the ball to guys that are hot. Bobby Petrino, and I know it's a terrible word around here to say, but one of the things he always talked about was feed the studs. Whoever's hot, get them the ball. Get the ball in their hands and let them go to work. And I think that's what you're seeing with Coach McDonald and Coach Williams and how they're managing their bullpen right now is just whoever's hot, give them the ball. Let them go out there on the mound and let them get outs. And I think it's good to see some of these other guys, younger guys out there kind of on the mound early in the season and having a lot of success. We're winning baseball games, but they're also in their outings that we've seen from them. They're just dominating the hitters that they're facing. So I think that has been really, really encouraging to me.
Oh no, I was just gonna add in, much like you're saying, in these early, non-conference games at home, that's exactly what they want to do or trying to do. Let's give all these guys an opportunity, one way or the other. Let's run them out there. Let's see what they have. Let's see how they respond to the environment, to this level, especially the young kids, the freshmen, or maybe a transfer or whatnot. Let's see how they respond to the environment. Let's see how they respond if something doesn't go according to plan or right. Maybe there's an error, maybe you don't get a call, whatever it may be. And can you move on? Can you get past it? What's the body language? All these different things. And, look, it hasn't gone perfect for everybody. And it isn't going to. Again, like I've said before, it doesn't go perfect for pro, so it's definitely not going to go perfect for college kids. And so, it's super. I'm always excited to see the kid come back off of, maybe he didn't have his best stuff the last time, or maybe he had an 0 for a day at the plate. Dan gets him, is able to run him back out there, get him back in the lineup. And how do they, are they able to get past that? Are they able to keep moving forward? And what did they learn from those situations? And so those are the things I really like learning, understanding, and seeing in these first, 3-4 weeks at home as we, can kind of, not to demean anybody, but play a little bit of a lesser opponent than what, the ACC schedule looks like, and just kind of get these kids accustomed to college baseball and accustomed to, this level, and just see what the makeup is and what they really have.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Just you at this point in the season, you kind of want them to see adversity, right? If they go out and just strike everybody out, that's good. That helps your record now, and you can stack up some wins now, and that's great. We want to win baseball games. That's why we play. But if you don't have any adversity against Western Michigan or teams like Butler and St. John's, and then you get into ACC play. We got one of the top 5 teams in the country coming into Jim Patterson Stadium next weekend in North Carolina. And the first time that you give up a home run, or first time you give up a run in the season as a freshman, is against a team like North Carolina. It's a big difference than Western Michigan's in the other dugout, right? So I think just experiencing a little bit of that adversity and letting them stay on the mound and figure it out yourself. right? Like that, I think that is what makes you a better teammate and a better team come the postseason play, when you have to deal with those things now rather than wait until it's too late and you're in conference play and you've never witnessed this before. So I think that is going to be something that's really big for this team to grow going forward. So and then we saw a little bit of that adversity against St. John's, right? So let's hop over to that series. That was a wild series all the way around. Louisville. And let's kind of go through those game by game, because I think that's probably the outside of the opening weekend, that's probably the biggest series we've played this weekend. We won on Friday 8-6 after falling behind 6-0, right? Like it was, and you talk about battling through adversity. I think in all 6 runs were unearned. So just seeing the team fight after they fall behind that early in a game, St. John scores 6 runs in the second inning, and Louisville ends up winning the game 8-6. What, being out there, what did you see? What did you feel? In going into the series, St. John's was a winless team. They were 0-7. They played some good baseball teams, had one of the strongest strength of schedules in the country. But what did you see from the team, and how did you feel they battled back against that type of adversity early on in the game?
The wind was really tough on Friday. It was when there is strong wind out there at Jim Patterson Stadium, a lot of times it is blowing out in left field, and that is what it was doing. But it was swirling a little bit out there. Anything that was hit extremely high in the air was a really difficult play, and you could almost see the ball kind of oscillating a little bit and moving around. Charged for 3 errors there in that second inning, and they get 6 runs. And, I thought a couple of them were, iffy error calls, just myself personally, but they're down as errors. And no matter if it's an error or not, they have 6 runs. You find yourself behind 6-0 to like you said, a winless baseball team who I'm in complete agreement with you. St. John's is not they're not some scrub baseball team. They're going to win. Mm-hmm. They're going to win their fair share of ball games this year, especially once they're able to get home, once they're able to, playing, get in the Big East, and they'll settle in conference play and things like that. It's not like they're not the same level as Butler or Western. That's a better baseball team. But the way the guys just kept chipping away and fighting through, and not only the hitters, but I thought the way that Patrick didn't let it get to him, because that's not the mental makeup of everybody when when things just aren't going their way, and it's not, none of those things were any of his doing. Again, whether it's an error or not, that's not even really the point. It's that maybe it's a play that should or could have been made, and they turn into runs, and you get, no matter what it is, you're down 6-0, and he just goes about his business and just keeps working, just keeps, the strikeout numbers are, through the roof again, keeps you right in the game to give you a chance. And I thought that, to me, was great to see from Patrick, because he'd been, for the most part, completely dominant. And again, he was again, but I just mean just down a couple runs that first game. He'd never really found himself too far behind yet. So I really enjoyed that out of Patrick. That was one of the things I liked. And then, obviously, the way the guys rallied back late, the Tague home run was amazing, to see him just get that moment. Hopefully anybody who had paid any attention, you obviously know how talented this kid is. But, he had, maybe it wasn't the start he wanted in Texas, but turns right around and is, puts that to the side, and the kid's been pretty much lights out since they got back off the plane in Louisville that weekend. And so, the big fly straight away, that was pretty awesome. When I was talking to him after the game, and he had said he didn't know it was out, and it wasn't out by much. He just got enough of that straight away center. So,
because he took off out of the box, he was running hard. I don't think he thought it was out.
No, he was running hard, and he should have been running hard, because it was, I think I was yelling for the ball to stretch, just keep going. But he, just eked it out of there. And great to see the boys rewarded for the way that they did stick with it, keep fighting. And that's probably one of the things I've enjoyed most about this team so far, is just the way that they just keep going about their business, no matter what the circumstances are previously or in that current moment.
Yeah, I think, keep going back to the word, they just kept fighting, right? Like they never laid down. They've had some adversity again, like you said, in this game. And it was good to see Tague, battle back. And he's, we got a true freshman that's leading the team in home runs. I know we're 10 games in, but, the fact that you've got a true freshman that's leading the team in long balls is, I think that is a testament to him. You talked about, in Texas, obviously he things could have gone a little bit better for him, but as a true freshman, the coaching staff continued to show confidence in him and put him out there, and look what it's done for him, and look what he's done for the team. So I think that's been huge, and then just the way that Patrick, and you mentioned, just the way he battled back and just continued to chip away and not let those errors completely derail the game plan. Because you see that with pitchers a lot, and I don't think Patrick is built that way, because he's a little bit older now. He's got some more maturity under his belt, and he's spent some time on the mound. But that's why he's the Friday night starter, right? Like he's just built different at this point in his career. So just seeing him continue to bounce back after a rough inning where they scored 6 runs, he was still able to get through 5 innings. It just helps with the bullpen management and the bullpen preservation through the rest of the weekend. So really proud to see how Patrick kind of bounced back after the kind of rough start that they had in the second inning on Friday night, and kind of set the tone for the weekend. And then we turned the page over to Saturday, where St. John's took that one 13-7. And really, most of the damage was done. They scored 9 of their runs in the final 2 innings. They scored 6 in the 8th and 3 more in the 9th, and to kind of seal the deal, which was different than what we saw on Friday. Kind of walk us through what you saw out there at the ballpark on Saturday, and what that looked like from your standpoint.
So I thought, again, another great start. Parker was really good.
Yeah, he was.
To get you through 6 innings, and I think when he came out, I think they had the lead, or they had taken the lead there in the bottom of the 7th, and so honestly, the turning point in the game to me was where it kind of seemed like it went a little sideways. I think we did have a couple runners in scoring position there, and I'm off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember if there were 1 or 2 outs when Baker came up, but just unable to kind of widen that lead out. I think it was 5-4 at the time. We're just kind of unable to widen the lead out and get any more runs in, and kind of, I don't want to say put it away, but really kind of take command of the baseball game at that point. It was curious to me only because they went defensive switch in the top half of the next inning. So I wasn't sure. George he was struggling to play a little bit that game, and so I thought that was a good pinch hit spot. Asked Dan about it afterwards. He agreed. It was something they had thought about. The splits, though, were basically the same on the pitcher. I understand that the splits are the same on the pitcher, but the splits aren't the same on the hitter. And so that's kind of the way that I was looking at it. But I understand that he's looking at the pitcher and that, he's thinking about it that way, but I was thinking about it the other way. And so I thought there was maybe a chance there to do something at that point, but you don't. But no matter what it is, you still have the lead going into those last 2 innings, right? The bullpen's been locked down for the most part. And coming into then, outside of that Saturday down in Texas, the bullpen had been unreal. It just didn't go our way that day, and that's the way it goes sometimes. It just, give them credit. Like Dan always says, they're good hitters too, right? And so, they're trying to hit the baseball just like we're trying to get them to not hit the baseball, and they were better than us that day. Yeah, they pulled away. They put it on us those last couple innings, and they came through with clutch hits. We fell behind by a good number there, and we're just never able to really get enough going at the plate in either one of those last 2 innings to really mount any kind of real rally.
And, we've kind of touched on this, coming into the weekend where St. John's was winless. I mean, you got to think of how hungry you are as a baseball team, right? To start your team or season 0-7, just how much they wanted it at that point in time, right? Like they're doing anything they can to get that first win, just to get that monkey off their back, to get the season started. And there's no better place to do it if you're St. John's than at a school like Louisville, right? On the road, an ACC, a Power 5 opponent. So I think I didn't see any quit in this team the entire weekend, which I was really impressed with that. Coming into the season or in the weekend without a win, struggled at Wake Forest. But they didn't quit. They never laid down. I mean, for 27 innings while they were here, they continued to battle. But you touch on this a little bit. Louisville left 13 runners on base. They just couldn't get that one hit. They just continued to lack that through the game. And like you said, they're trying to get us out as much as we're trying to get a hit. That's just sometimes it's just baseball. That's part of it. But they come back on Sunday and win the series, and that's what matters. In baseball, you win the series. That's all everybody cares about. We don't think about Saturday now because you came back and won on Sunday and improved to 8-2 on the season. A guy we've talked about on this podcast the past couple episodes in length has been Peter Michael, and man, he was just fabulous again. Through 5 2/3, struck out 6. I mean, just really set the Louisville offense up to get out in front and set the tone for this game on Sunday on getaway day to wrap up the series with the win. So outside of Michael, or even to add to Michael, what were your thoughts on the Sunday game?
I just love the mental makeup. I know I talked about this before, and we've talked about it, at length, just about pitchers in general. But 2 of his 3 starts so far, and the 2 that he's been the best in, have been coming off a loss. And, we have spoken in, previous episodes about, this Sunday pitching is an area where we lacked a little bit last year. And this year, that does not seem to be the case. The bullpen is deep. Michael's given you, at 2 of the 3 times, outstanding stuff. He was virtually untouchable again. And just his mental makeup, along with the makeup of the rest of the team, is really what set the stage for the whole day. And to be able to throw a veteran out there, and I'm going to get to some other guys in a second, but to be able to throw a veteran guy out there who's been through, some ups and downs in his career, has been able to work through those, is such a key for this team, and such a way for him to lead by example for all those other kids, whether they're pitchers or hitters. When you can look out at the mound and see somebody who's been through some things and has come out the other side and is doing a great job at a Power 4 school, I think that helps everybody. I love that kid, man. I'm so excited for him that he's doing well, and I couldn't be happier for him. As far as the rest of the day goes, it's kind of an interesting day, just hit wise, where, or offense wise, where, maybe some of the guys who have been the key contributors earlier in the season, the middle of the lineup wasn't quite as good, but Dan flips around, Alisea and Moore, those 2 guys are the catalyst for the whole day. And so it was great to see, Alex's home run that was so awesome. I mean, that thing was, he said after that he did not know it was gone when he hit it. You could tell it was gone when he hit it from my vantage point. So that was pretty awesome. Just kind of reminded me of Knapczyk's home run, when the way that they were, just the excitement, the way they just almost seemed to float around the bases. They were so happy. Pretty cool moment for him. Lucas is out there causing problems on the base paths again and comes up with a huge hit. So I thought those 2 guys being the catalyst up front was pretty awesome. And, whatever it was that made Dan decide he needed to switch it up and get back to, more of how he had gone last year with Lucas up top, it worked. And it was the key offensively to the baseball game.
Yeah, I was really excited to see how those 2 produced. That is something they talked about quite a bit on the broadcast on Sunday, was just the flipping those 2. And I thought it was hilarious. Assad tweeted the Little League Baseball World Series kid that the kind of the big kid that says, "My name's Big Al and I hit dingers." that was perfect timing by Assad posting that. When he hit the ball, I was watching here at the house, and I was like, that ball's out of here. I was like, well, Alisea hit that. Wait a minute. And then the ball just kept going and going and going. So just excited to see him. And like you said, when you go back to the Knapczyks that, when they hit the home run, they always hit a couple of them, just you play, you're going to hit home runs every now and then, but just the excitement they show for the guys like that they typically don't show the power numbers. It's just good to see. So that was exciting from Alisea. And then after that, I thought it was interesting that Dan and Roger rolled out 3 freshmen out of the bullpen after Michael. You've got a grad transfer from Northwestern that's been around a time or two, and then you roll out a couple freshmen, the next 3 arms out of the bullpen. Murphy didn't record an out, but he was still, he was the next option. So to see just the confidence they have in those kind of 3 guys to come out of the bullpen as when you need outs, right? This is a game you've got to win the series. To show the confidence in 3 younger guys was something that I was impressed with. And then we talked about a little bit earlier, Daniel Levitch coming in at the end of the game, and he struck out all 3 batters that he faced in the 9th inning. I think he has just been electric over his I think 4 or 5 innings that he's thrown this year. So just really excited to see him progress, bouncing back this year to see what he can do to help this team contribute. Before we kind of tie the bow up on the St. John series, any final thoughts or anything else you want to touch on that you saw at the ballpark this past weekend or the weekend before, for that matter?
Yeah, I was going to jump in just about the freshman pitchers that you had just mentioned. Much like you had said, the thing that sticks out outside of just the way they closed the game. Those 3 were able to finish the game off for them. Much like you mentioned, it's the fact that that game was not over when Dan's putting those kids in there. It's not, that game was not finished, and it never, it didn't feel like it was over either. And so, he brings Murphy in, and yeah, of course. And Dan mentioned after again, yeah, I'm sure that didn't go how he wanted it to go, and I'm sure he didn't like it, and they'll run him right back out again and give him another go. He has good stuff. They really like him. And so, they wouldn't run him out there if they didn't in that situation. But he sees 2 batters. I thought Dan on Sunday pressed essentially all the right buttons. And that really stood out. I mean, again, Murphy, outside of that, not going exactly the way, he got in for a couple batters, didn't have it, right to Ethan. And with the bases loaded, and 2 outs, and he comes in and gets that strikeout, man, what a moment for that kid to just, in the heat of the battle, come in, your team needs you. Honestly, probably at that point, biggest spot he's ever been in his life pitching-wise, and get you right out of it. I thought that was awesome. So I thought that button right there was great. He comes back and brings in early to extend the lead there in the 9th with another double. That kid had a great, has been outstanding since the last time we talked. He gets a couple at bats, he gets a homer, he gets a double down the line. Clearly is pushing for more playing time, whether it be a DH spot or, Dan has so far been able to figure out, the right spots to use him. He's come through. Obviously, you're not going to get hit every time you come up as a pinch hitter, but a couple big spots he's found, he's had the right swing, so he'll continue to push for more time. And then like you said about Wyatt, the thing about Wyatt is he's finally healthy. And not only is he healthy, but Wyatt always had flashes of, he's always had the stuff. It's just, does he have control? That's the thing that he's been displaying this year, is he's just pounding the strike zone. I'm almost positive it was 11 out of 12 pitches for strikes on Sunday. I mean, he is just, everything is in there. He's commanding off-speed pitches. He's commanding his fastball. And again, he's not one of these kids that just jumps off the page at you with what is, metrics are going to be or anything like that, but he has figured out how to land his off-speed stuff for strikes, and it's been the difference in his year so far. I mean, I didn't look since, but his numbers coming into Sunday, I mean, I know his ERA is 0, but I mean, his numbers coming into Sunday, I think his whip was 0.3. So it's obviously going down. I mean, so happy for him. He's ultra talented. If he can stay healthy, he is going to get a lot of opportunities the rest of this season, because he has been landing everything for strikes and has proved that it doesn't matter what the moment is so far. You run him out there, it isn't too big for him.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of what Jeff Walls has done this year with the women's basketball team. There's a ton of newcomers, and most of them are freshmen on the team this year. And you saw him take some, lumps on the chin early, because when you roll that many newcomers out there, things like that are going to happen. You're going to get beat. But as the seasons progress, I mean, they just keep getting better and better. I mean, they found themselves in the top 25. They're looking, good heading in the tournament. But what Dan has been able to do with some of the freshmen early on is just get them experience, and they're just continuing to build their confidence. And I know why it's not a freshman, but he's, coming back from injuries and, just battle back. And it's, but these other young guys that he's allowing to get confidence right now. So when their number really needs to be called and we need a couple outs, or we need an out, against North Carolina next weekend, like we've got confidence in a guy like Murphy to go out there and get an out. So I think that is going to pay huge dividends as this season progresses, if we can continue to roll those guys out during these types of games to build their confidence and get that mentally prepare them for those moments. So I think that is going to be massive, because we've talked about this on here before. Pitching is such a mental game, right? Like, you got to have the stuff, like you got to have the metrics, you got to be out there, you got to be able to pound the strike zone, and you got people look at spin rate, they look at velo, they look at all this stuff, but mentally you've got to have that between the ears to pitch at the college level. So that's a big part of it. So just building that confidence and getting them ready for ACC play is something huge. So excited to see a lot of these guys have their moment before we get to conference play. So let's kind of turn the page and look at what is up ahead. Louisville is going to host UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, this weekend for a 3-game series. They are 2-10 or 1-10, depending on how you want to look at it. They played a D3 team, so if you count that, if they're not 2-10 or 1-10, so I'll let you count that as you will. Another series at Jim Patterson Stadium, Friday at noon, and then Saturday and Sunday at 1. This was a really good team last year, though, right? They finished 5th in the Missouri Valley Conference, that's no slouch. That's a very, very good baseball conference. Kind of made some noise in the tournament before. I think Indiana State and Brennan Cutts actually knocked them out of the tournament. So his squad booted them last season, but this year they're 22nd in strength of schedule. So they've lost a lot of games, but they've played some really good baseball teams. I know it's early on, so looking at metrics is kind of all over the place at this point in the season. Team ERA just shy of 9.5, so they're struggling on the mound, and they're only scoring about 5 runs a game. So that's just that's tough. But again, you look at St. John's coming into this weekend, they hadn't won a game. So, this is an opportunity for Louisville to go out and take care of business. But at the same time, this team's going to be hungry, just like the Red Storm when they came into Jim Patterson Stadium this weekend. I personally haven't had a chance to watch UIC play yet. I've kind of jumped through their roster and stats and all that stuff yet. Good opportunity for Louisville to win a couple of baseball games. But you got to go out and play the game, right? If you have a couple of innings like we saw, a couple errors here, a couple errors there, things could tilt the wrong way. Tell me what you think about UIC coming in this weekend to prepare. This is our last weekend series. Believe it or not, this is crazy to think about. This is our last weekend series before we start conference play and welcome North Carolina next weekend. So just kind of talk about UIC for a few minutes.
So typically, the main difference between some of these mid-majors, especially the ones that are, a little better. And I know they're obviously have not been off to a good start. And, just one thing about the schedule, the strength of schedule metrics and things like that in our RPI and things like that, if you wanted to pay attention to them, they're very volatile at this time of the year. But if you wanted to look at them, they're not great. But it's not for lack of effort. That's the thing. It's not like they're seeking out opponents, who are going to have low RPIs, low win numbers, and things like that. That's not how this has gone. This, Western was in a regional last year. St. John's was in a regional last year. I think it's very, very hard in today's college game to schedule not knowing exactly what somebody has, as the roster turnover is just at an all-time high now. And so it makes it a lot harder. UIC has been a very solid baseball program for the last, they were in our regional, was it 19?
Yeah, it wasn't too terribly long
5-ish
ago.
years ago.
Yeah.
And they were really good. And the main difference between that level of baseball team and an ACC, baseball team, honestly, is pitching depth. And so typically there'll be somebody on a Friday that they have that's pretty good, but it's just a lot of times the fall off is a little more severe than it would be at some other schools. And with the numbers you mentioned, they are giving up a lot of runs a game. There's no doubt about that. They're not scoring as many. But the thing is, baseball, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but much like hockey, it is so day to day and so pitch to pitch bounce. I know that we obviously play on a turf field, but I mean, you get a different kick here. You get a ball spins in the dirt a different way, hits a catcher a different way. All of a sudden, it's a pass ball, it's a wild pitch, it's a run can come in, a runner advances, different things like that. Hockey, kick off the boards a different way, whatever it may be, off a skate. I think of those sports very similar, just in terms of they're a little more volatile day to day than some other games. To be able to make sure that those things don't affect you, you have to go out and handle your business and do your job. That's much of the way I've looked at this kind of pre-conference slate is, let's do our job. And so, look, if Patrick Forbes goes out there and gives you double-digit strikeouts or right in there, just is the guy he's been so far, you should win that baseball game, right? You would think you've got a real good shot to win that baseball game if he's been who he's, is who he's been so far. Parker Detmers is trending greatly the last couple weeks. So you love you love your option there on Saturday to run him right back out, and let's see, can he keep building momentum as, like you said, you go into ACC play where, I mean, at least on paper, you're going to see one of the, at the very worst, top 3 teams in the conference. Then Sunday you get the option with Michael, run right back out again. Let's let him continue to build and keep progressing toward, what the ultimate goal is going to be in ACC play to stick your hat right in there for, can we be in the mix for a conference title? To put yourself in that position, you have to build yourself to that point. That's what I like about, these, whether it's a midweek or these weekends early in the season to kind of begin to hone it in as we, come down. I think as of right now, I think there's 6 games left until conference play begins, and we need to handle business in these 6 games. Let's keep, Dan has, for the most part, settled in on, some lineup things he likes. He might move you around the order a little bit, but especially with Eddie hurt right now, it makes it a little easier in the outfield. And so, but let's continue to just build momentum. I think we got back on the right track there on Sunday, and let's see if the boys can keep building momentum as we head towards ACC play.
I think one of the biggest thing that you kind of touched on towards the beginning, we're talking about, when you, as a coach, when you're building your schedule for next year, it's so challenging, right? Like you put a team like UIC on the schedule and a team like St. John's and Western Michigan who've had success the prior years. You don't know what they're going to do this year. And where college baseball is so heavily relied, and not just college baseball, all college sports are so heavily relied upon metrics and numbers and strength of schedule and RPI, that stuff is so heavily weighed. You have no idea what these teams are going to do from year to year. And I think that is probably, as a head coach, one of the most challenging things, because you put some of these teams on the schedule, and I'm not saying Western Michigan, they could go undefeated in their conference. St. John's, they could go up and blow up in the Big East and win the Big East this year. I'm not saying they're not going to, but so far this season, you've seen some struggles out of those teams, and same with UIC. But that doesn't mean they're not going to turn it around. But it kind of creating a schedule and putting a schedule together that is going to help your metrics from year to year is really challenging, because that stuff doesn't happen overnight. These things are set well in advance because just the logistics and travel and all that good stuff. So I think that's a really, really good point when you're building a schedule, because, we saw a couple of years ago, the trend kind of started where teams were starting to cancel midweek games because, they were too afraid that it was going to hurt their RPI. Even if you win the game against a team like not to pick on them, but like a Bellarmine, for example, okay, yeah, we go beat Bellarmine, but it's still going to drop our RPI just because their RPIs in the 200s. That's a really challenging thing to accomplish right now, and I can't imagine coaches trying to put those together. But nonetheless, Louisville is so far they've beaten the majority of teams that have put in front of them. I think if we back ourselves up a couple weeks and we say, okay, Louisville's 8-2 going into this week, I'm pretty happy with that, right? Knowing that you've got Texas, Oklahoma State, and Arizona right out the bat. I think if you say we're 8-2 after 10 games this season, I'd be really, really pleased with that. I think that's kind of where we are. But going into the last 3 games against Illinois, Chicago, then we got 2 midweeks next week against Lipscomb, which we've been even with over the past couple of years. We split the 4 games with them, and then we've got a midweek against Oakland. So 2 midweeks next week before we've got North Carolina coming in here. What are the biggest things that you think we need to accomplish? And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you think the coaching staff is really looking for over these last couple games?
So I did want to make one mention of one thing that I skipped over last time. Just that this Friday's game, for anyone who is listening and whatever, is a noon first pitch. So it's elementary school day.
That's right.
I know that there are some fans who, may or may not like elementary school day but personally, I love it. I think it's fun to have the ballpark full. I guess I don't necessarily know if the players do or don't like it, but I would think you would like having a full ballpark and kids screaming and cheering for you. But Friday, they just weren't able to really find anybody that could do a midweek early. And so this is when it gets scheduled. And so it is this Friday at noon, first pitch. So, anybody, if you're not, if your school is not part of the group that's already going, if you want to bring your kid out Friday at noon, first pitch, get to see one of the best pitchers in the country toe the rubber for Louisville. And so I think that'll be pretty fun for the kids, at least to get to, whereas it's a little different during a midweek. Sometimes you get a few more pitchers in there, and it might obviously not your number one guy or anything, but so I think that'll be pretty cool for kids at the ballpark or parents to bring their kids to the ballpark that day. So that'll happen this Friday.
Yeah.
Next week.
That is always a fun game. I always love the elementary school day. I'm not going to be able to make it this Friday, but it's always a fun game. You can just see the kids out there. They really enjoy it. It's a different level of excitement, and you hear all the kids talking the whole time. They're paying attention for the first couple innings, and then you can tell their attention span kind of drops off a little bit. But it's fun to see, like you said, it's fun to see the ballpark packed on a midweek game. So I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't realize that it was actually this Friday. So glad you brought that up, and hopefully you enjoy that this Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, it's obviously they play different songs on the video board. You get the Baby Shark out there and all these different things. And so I just, it's fun. Sometimes some of the kids bring sack lunch. They're passing them out, or, you got to take rows to the bathroom at a time. It's fun. I'm sure that the, those who are in charge of that thing, that seems like very hard to coordinate and do some of those things. But as someone who's a bystander and just gets to kind of witness that, I enjoy all that, and just love, again, I like to see the young kids just out at the ballpark. I like anybody, just get them out there, get them exposed to it. Maybe they'll go home and tell their, family, hey, I love this. Can we do, can we go to this game? Can we go to another game, whatever. So that's something that I always enjoy, just trying to get the young kids involved in the sport. Same reason, I love the anthem buddies and all that stuff. Just get young kids out to the ballpark, get families out there. And I think the place that I've been in the last few years that does the best job with that is the University of Miami. They announce the kids at the stadium and let them run out to a spot with a player. I think that's amazing. It just makes the experience even better. I mean, it is great, obviously, for the kids to go out and be the anthem buddies, but to have them get to be announced and run out to third base with the third baseman at Miami, or, second base, whatever it may be, that was really cool. So I just thought it's just a really little thing that they do that takes a few more minutes, but it probably means the world to those kids. Their families there, they're on, they're videoing it. That would make you want to come back to the ballpark. So I just think, Miami does a really, really good job with that. I think Miami's known for their milkshakes. They let the kids go get a free milkshake, that kind of thing. So just some small things at the ballpark can go a long ways with kids and with parents of kids. As far as the following week goes, those two games to me, just to switch gears to it, with Lipscomb, who, has been a little bit of a thorn in our side, right? For the last little while. Yeah, you're almost like, hey, do we want to keep scheduling this team? But no, not really. But with Lipscomb and with Oakland being two games right before ACC play starts with North Carolina, I really look for a lot of arms to be used out of the bullpen. I think we're going to go really deep into the bullpen those 2 days. I mean, I think you're going to see essentially staff days for the most part, just to try to, you want to have everybody's arm that you're, quote unquote, going to need for that weekend against North Carolina as fresh as possible. So again, like we've talked about earlier today, more opportunities for some kids, maybe a little farther down the chart at this point, to get to run out there and get an inning or two in, and maybe even for some other guys to get in the lineup. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, who knows, maybe a Shiver could pop in the game, somebody like that. You're likely to see probably Baker and Tyson both behind the plate, at least a little bit those 2 days. Whether someone comes in late for Matt or they split time another day or however it works, you're probably likely to see both of those guys. So just, not necessarily a last opportunity for some of these guys, but a great opportunity for some of these kids to showcase, hey, maybe if something didn't go their way the first time, I learned from, I took this from my last opportunity. I've adjusted in this way, and just I'm looking forward to that aspect of those two couple games. Again, I don't want to just say, hey, these are W's, but they are games you should win. And so let's hope that that they can handle business early, and let's showcase some of our depth, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. And I think the approach to this is going to be, this is our final tune-up before we head into conference play, right? And like you said, they're going to be staff days. They're kind of going to be used as their quote-unquote bullpen for those guys that are throwing. They're going to go out and throw an inning or two at the most, and you're not going to see anybody really get in a groove because they're not going to throw enough, because they got to save their arm for the weekend. Like that, North Carolina series, that matters. That's when you're looking at the schedule for next week, those 3 games, they really matter. So I think we're going to see just a bunch of arms and probably a bunch of guys getting to swing the bat that we maybe haven't seen as much, just to get them some extra reps and repetition at the plate. And Coach Mack has done this before. He likes to play 2 games the week of opening conference play. He's just done that in the past. That's kind of his thing. I think just as a final tune-up, let the guys play 18 innings as opposed to 9, just to get them on the field and mentally get them prepared for conference play, because it's here. And I can't believe we're already talking about ACC baseball. Like it just seems like we were talking just a short time ago about a preseason episode talking about the season starting, and here we are. North Carolina's here next Friday, so that's exciting. I think it's a huge opportunity, and really excited to see how the team's going to bounce back and respond. And with UIC this weekend, followed by Oakland and Lipscomb next week before we head into conference play. So I think it's a big opportunity. But I think before we even turn the page to North Carolina, you got to take care of business against these next couple games before we really get to them. So don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, because just play clean baseball and get ready for conference play. So before we turn the page to UIC, Terry, any final thoughts before we head on out?
I'm very encouraged by, you made mention of, if before the season started at this point, if you would have said 8-2, you'd feel real good about it. And I feel the same. I think, to be honest, the season has gone just about the exact way I thought it was going to go so far, just in terms of wins and losses type thing. And the pitching has been really good outside of, just an inning here or there. And, you mentioned the average numbers for the hitters and things like that. And I mean, there are some dudes on this team that are really, really seeing the baseball well right now. So I think if you've paid a lot of attention, or if you've, heard us talk, earlier in the season, this team is what I thought it was going to be so far. That's encouraging to me, because that's not how it always ends up. How you look on paper, you have to go out and handle business. And so far, I think, like I said, there's going to be innings here or there that don't go your way, but in the the overall picture, I think has been really good, and I think it's really encouraging going forward.
I've been positive about what we've seen so far from this team. From the hitting to the pitching. I think defensively there's some room there to improve, but like you said, 8-2, where we are right now is where I kind of hoped and wished we would be at this point in time. So no complaints here on my side, and hopefully we're talking next week with a couple more wins under our belt as we prepare for a couple more midweeks, and then welcome the Tar Heels in next weekend. But in the meantime, before we get there, Terry, kind of go ahead and plug your Twitter account and let them know where they can find you. Because like I said, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You constantly post the videos. You talk to Coach Mack after the game. You kind of talk to the players of the game, and they're very insightful. So for those that aren't there, that don't have that access, you posting those videos, I think it's very beneficial. The fans love that stuff. So I kind of tell everybody where they can find your videos and catch up with the coaches and players after the game.
Yeah, I just have a YouTube channel. If you like to go about YouTube that way, I know you can do the podcast, this podcast that way as well, if people want to watch on YouTube. So, just Inside Louisville Baseball is my YouTube channel. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's basically just interviews during the season with Coach Mack, and then after W's, grab a player or two as well and talk to them after the wins. Really, the only other things I would ever do on there is if I'm seeing a high school kid, I'll usually put some highlights together or whatever of a kid who's already committed, or talk to them maybe after, I've seen them play and things like that, just to let people see, maybe what's coming down the chute a little bit of, again, it's mostly just anyone who's already committed at this point. But then I do also just link all that stuff to my Twitter account at InsideVilleBSB. And yeah, tweet, live tweet during the games, as long as, my fingers aren't going to freeze off up there in section 203. And yeah, just post the videos there as well for sure.
Hopefully this weekend the weather's a little bit better, and we don't have the wind that we had this weekend with the 35-40 mile an hour temperatures to kind of add that and make it even worse from what it was. So you can find me on Twitter at Matt Sefcovic. You can obviously find us on Twitter at Third Central Pod. Be sure wherever you listen to us on our podcast, if it's Apple, Spotify, wherever it may be, like us, rate us, subscribe, all the good things, so you can catch all of our content going forward. We'll be back next week with another episode previewing, like we've talked about, conference play. It's here. Ready or not, North Carolina will be here next weekend. But in the meantime, in the words of Sean Moth, we will see you at the ballpark.